Okay, so today we're going to continue looking at metrics related to social media. Today I'm going to show you how sentiment and organic shares can be valued and a couple of really good measures that you may want to take into account as you're reporting to upper management the conversation that's happening. So let's talk about net brand sentiment and net reputation scores. Now, when you look at this, you're going to get two pretty different scores, and you'll have to make a judgment of which one you feel is more representative or more helpful in your decision making. But it may make sense to report both, but explain the difference between the two. So here's how we calculate net brand sentiment. It's a pretty easy calculation. So imagine that we're on Twitter. We would take the number of positive mentions, add in the neutral ones, subtract out any negative mentions, and then we would look at the total conversations. Now this would be all your positive, your neutral, and your negative all added together. So let's practice. Let me give you a real example. So if we look at a conversation about your brand for a month, you have 100 positive tweets, 50 are neutral, and then 10 are negative. They're just really bad. Let's substitute this into the equation. 100 positive and your 50 neutral. Let's subtract out the negative, minus 10. And the total conversations is adding all those elements together. Simplify. Now we've got 140 over 160, or 0.875 or 87.75 score. So that's pretty good. But what's the net reputation score, and how is that different? Will that provide a higher score or a lower score in comparison to what we just did? Let's take a look. So the net reputation score is the percentage of your positive comments minus the percentage of your negative. So that means we have to make a calculation. You have 160 tweets, and 100 tweets divided by 160 is 62.5. 10 is 6.25%. Let's substitute out. And then our net reputation score is 56.25. Now, why is that lower than the last calculation we just did? Well, the reason why is that we're not taking into account those neutral tweets. So you can see that these give a really different metric for guidance, and that's why you may want to report both, but always have an explainer or a pop-up that will explain or give, say, a lay audience of what these elements are. Neutral can be a really challenging element, and so it makes sense that you may want to pull those out. Yes, your net reputation score is lower here, but that may mean that, you've got some work to do so that they don't feel, lukewarm about your brand. So I'm actually a fan of the net reputation score. It is a harder metric, but it gives you a better idea of what you need to work on. Now let's look at the cost per subscriber and the value of organic shares. So what we're really going to be looking at is how much does it cost when you do a paid campaign, and that's a super simple calculation, and what's the value of any additional shares that happens. And those are really nicely tied together metrics. So in this case, we have 5,000 impressions from a paid campaign. You paid $1,000. It's not really great, actually. And then 500 people shared the tweet associated with your paid campaign. So cost per impression is literally what it says, cost divided by impressions. So in this case, it's $1,000 divided by 5,000 impressions, or 20 cents per impression. Really simple calculation. Now, let's see how much additional value was given to you by doing through organic shares. So the additional value would be what you just calculated, the cost per impressions times the number of organic shares. So we know that there was 0.2 cost per impression, 500 organic shares, or you got $100 value. Now, why is this relevant? because this is another element that you could add into a return on investment calculation. So what you did in quiz 1 continues to grow in what you can add to your calculations, how to make them more sophisticated, and be more representative of truly what your efforts are. When you see this on a quiz, you will see exactly what you see on this PowerPoint. Smiley face, neutral face, frowny face. And it will say positive, neutral, negative. You'll see dollars for campaign costs and then shares. It'll be almost identical to what you see here. These are very simple calculations, but they're very, very powerful. And they're things that you should definitely be looking at. Now, another couple of caveats I want you to be aware of. As you're thinking about this, understand that when you're using technology, often it will misconstrue some pieces of content. For example, sarcasm. A lot of times machines don't do very good at understanding that while the words may be positive, the intent is negative. So the most reliable way to test sentiment is actually to sit there and code, and then have a couple of people code and then look to see where they disagree. And then you do the simple calculation. But when you're using a marketing cloud that does this for you, this is basically how they're doing the calculations. So this is all you need to know for the quantitative component of Quiz 2. Thank you for your attention.